Good morning, folks. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jay from Unfiltered Fishing. I make fishing videos with my girlfriend, Nicole. Um, and I like to answer questions that people put out there. So, Ryan put a question on my last video. How do I tactically approach the season? And he said April through June. If I did April through June, it would be probably a really long video. So what I'll do is I'm going to break this down into smaller sections, starting with about March, mid March through probably late April through now, and I'll make a separate video later on May, June, because I do a lot of different things. I don't really do the same thing over and over again. So, all right. So starting off mid March, April. Ryan, if you're out there listening, uh, if you asked me this question 3 to 5 years ago, I would have been, ecstatic to try to help you out with this. What seems to have happened, like I've said in previous videos, is that number of fish that was there, that basically we're targeting in that early season, is diminished greatly. And because they've grown out of that slot, and because we have 5, 6 consecutive years of bad spawns, now I'm not seeing those fish. So, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, you would have asked me this question. I could confidently tell you to go out, pound the areas that I'm going to talk about, and you were going to have some success. I was confident that if I sent you out there to do it, you were going to have some success. Now, not so much. It was really a grind this spring, or this early spring anyway. And it's not just for me, because I'm sitting there thinking, oh God, do I suck? All of a sudden, can I not catch fish anymore? And I've talked to quite a few people. I do have a bit of a network, and it seems like we've all struggled this year. I didn't fish much last spring, well, at all, really much last year, because I was working, trying to just make as much overtime as I could before I got out of there. Uh, so yeah, it's been a bit of a grind. I mean, basically the word we've all come up with is deplorable. That's kind of been the season so far. Not to say that there hasn't been specific nights that it's good, and I'll speak about that too, because that's really going to be tactically how I approach these seasons coming up while we're in this lull. When I was working out in that area, I worked in Queens, so I fished. Was fishing 10 minutes, 20 minutes away from where I worked. So that'll, North Shore, Long Island, or North Shore, Western Sound, we'll say, because some of it wasn't Long Island. Some of it was, quite a bit of it was into Queens. Uh, when I worked there, it made a lot of sense for me to, drive 10 minutes to hit these spots and pound them after work if the tide lined up. Now, it's really not been the case. So now to drive an hour to try to pound these spots out. What is she barking at? Whatever. It is, now I'm wasting gas and putting extra miles on a truck that I really don't need to put extra miles on for no reason. So, all right. So let's talk tactically how I approached the seasons even this year. Is, mid to late March, I'll start getting out there, and I look for the deepest parts of the bay, as far back as you can get, away from the sound, away from the mouth of the bay, all the way into the back where you'll have a lot of mud flats, basically, is what you have out there. And during the low tide, these things are completely drained out. You could, if you're throwing anything, you land it on top of mud. And that tends to warm up very quickly in the sun. It's dark. It absorbs the sunlight. It warms up. The water comes back in on it. It warms that water up, and bait fish and predatory fish in kind are going to they're going to gravitate there to feed or to get warm or to be in warm water. So those are the spots that I'm looking for. And that's where I'm going to particularly target. What I'm going to use to target them, most of the time it's going to be, early season, just looking for the first fish or first couple of fish. Probably like the 5-inch SP minnow or something in that kind, mag darter. Don't want anything that digs too deep. You only have about a 4 or 5 hour window back there on, between the last 2.5 hours of the incoming, maybe through the slack, and it turns around pretty quickly up there. So another 2.5 hours back from there. And you try to find some deeper holes, walk around, move around, see if you can find some deeper channels that you could still continue to work. Those kind of things. It's a big swing, tide swing on the North Shore. What is it, like 8 feet? So, you're talking about fishing in relatively no water at the beginning of the tide to, about 8 feet at the top of the tide, and maybe a little bit more during a moon tide. That's where particularly I'm targeting. Again, with the SP minnows, the mag darters, the smaller stuff that you can throw, small bombers, you can get them out there. And a lot of times those fish aren't far from your feet when they start filtering in, because you got a lot of sod banks back there, and typically the fish are gonna hold pretty tight to that, looking for bait that, trying to get up onto that to not be out in the open water. Like I said, 3-5 years ago, this was relatively successful, because the size of the fish that you get earlier that season and earlier in the season, little guys from like 10 to 12 inches to about 24 inches, and every once in a while you get a decent one. Every once in a while you get a keeper. And I move around quite a bit because I kind of had spots that I had, and then all of a sudden it became very crowded, and I'm getting there at 1 o'clock in the morning, and there's 15 people standing there. So I'm like, oh, all right, well, kind of got to get out of this. So I have found quite a few little spots that I could, legally park and get back to these areas. And that's another thing. Parking in those areas, especially typically on the North Shore, is a bit rough. A lot of no parking signs in neighborhoods, in some of the neighborhoods up there. But you'll go on Google Maps, you'll see what I'm talking about. You're looking for that funnel down all the way to the end, where almost there's creeks probably at the end of it leading into it, coming from freshwater, and then those fish will go into those creeks as well. And a lot of times, that's what they were doing, and we're getting them either pinning those fish in there, pinning the bait fish in, and then coming back out. As for tide, I've seen it be good year to year on an incoming. I've seen it be good on the outgoing. So, you typically have that 4 hours. If you can find a pattern where they're hitting. This year, the pattern that I had was pretty much probably like the next to the last hour of the tide. It seemed to be when almost all my hits came and almost all my fish came. The fish that I'm gonna put up on the what do they call that thing now? The thing for the video, whatever. You guys see the picture when you click on the video. That was one fish, one fish, right in that wheelhouse. Last hour of the tide. I was with Nicole. I wasn't videoing at the time because it wasn't really a good night, so I didn't really have the camera on in this night, so you really can't see anything. And that fish kind of came out of nowhere, probably about 20 feet in front of me. Hanging close to those sod banks. So typically, early season, that's what I'm, how I'm kind of targeting these fish, and I'm looking for bait in the water. That does definitely make a big difference on how I'm going to fish and what I'm going to fish. If I'm seeing a lot of spearing tied in, which is typically what I see, spearing for the most part, I'm going to continue to work those SP minnows and have success with that. I have had nights where most of the bait was on the top and I could see fish waking, and those fish would not touch an SP minnow. I was putting it right in front of them. I was going right through them. They did not care. So, what's the next logical step? All right, well, they're feeding on top. I threw on a metal lip, and that was successful. And that wasn't this year. That was about 2 years ago because, like I said, the past 2 springs, I really haven't seen much of anything. There was a video that I put out there where me and Nicole both had those 30 pounders. That was, again, early April. And and that was on the moons. And that's the next thing I'm going to discuss. If you really, those are the days that you have to be out there tactically. 3 days before, 3 days after. I don't know when it's going to be before or when it's going to be after. The year that I made that video, it was after the moon. The fish that kind of came in this year for 1 or 2 tides were before the moon. So now, moving on next year, I'm not going to sit there and try to find these smaller fish that come in and drive an hour and cast for 3 hours for 3 hits. Moving forward, likely what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to target those 6 days. That's it. I'm just going to target those 6 days on that early April moon, and look for the most payload out of these trips, rather than trying to go 10 trips and not really catch anything. Like before, it was worth it. Before, it was like you'd go out there almost any given night, and you'd be into fish. It's just not there. Hopefully it recovers, in some time before the end of my life, because I really did have some good times with some great friends out there. And that's another thing. I'm not even seeing them out there anymore. I'm not even seeing the typical guys that I used to, the local guys that I knew. I mean, I haven't seen anybody out there, at all. That's how bad it's been the past 2 years. So, all right. So, moving on from there, like I said, so look for bait. That's going to help you. What is the bait doing? Is it near the surface? Is it kind of hanging towards the bank? That's kind of like how I'm going to set up with it. And in addition to the SP minnows and the mag darters and stuff like that, I'll also use a pretty light jig head, because you really don't want to hit the bottom there, because you're just going to get gunked up. Not a lot of current. A light jig head and a Keitech or a curly tail seems to do the trick. Maybe a light bucktail. I've never really had success throwing bucktails back there, but I have seen it work on certain occasions. But for the most part, most of mine and everybody who I've seen fish back there is pretty much throwing the same things. Bunker, that's another thing that you really got to look for. I didn't see much of any of it this year at all. Sometimes I don't see it. Sometimes you just bump into it and you're like, oh, what was that on a bunker? And then you're getting fish. That really drives that bite back there too. And I really didn't see much of any of it. And, the fish don't particularly have to be in one bay. They're so close together that it could be one of 3. So I kind of try to bounce around a little bit between 2 of them. I really don't know much access with the third. So that's kind of it. You get a night with bunker on that moon, and you're gonna be into some decent fish, rather than the small fish that we kind of chase just to get the to knock winter out of us, for the season. Moving on to April and now. Well, later on in April and now. The past few years, there's been more fish locally to me in the bay than there is this year. Once again, I'm going to attribute it to, it's just, again, those fish are the fish that we typically would have, that are the 18 to 24 inch below the slot range and, into the slot range. So I've been pounding it here without any success, not even limited success. It's and again, not seeing very much bait yet. The water is still cold. My concern is that, typically you'd be picking up small fish by now, and I'm not seeing very much of anything besides just a couple of fish come up, and not for me. So I did see bunker last night, so that's good. They're out here. No fish on them, but there was bunker around, and I threw the kitchen sink around them. Couldn't get a touch, and they didn't look like they were being harassed. Usually typically tell when they're being harassed. It was just kind of there. So again, like now this time of year, I'm typically local, but the tactics really haven't changed. I'm looking more structure-wise in the back bay, looking for channels, looking for faster moving water, looking at bridges. Typically these fish will come in, swim in, and hold on to bridges and just there'll be bait because there's light at night. Baits attract the light and fish hide in the shadows. So typically that's how I'll approach now later on in this season. And again, there's some sod banks and stuff out here that I typically target, and I do well there also. And again, same kind of concept that I was saying is that bait fish gets real close to those sod banks and hangs on it, and the fish are going to follow it in and just kind of be on the outskirts of it, waiting for one to make a mistake and swim too far off it and snatch it up. Or they'll wait for the tide to start draining, and these fish have no choice but to get off of it and just kind of hang off the lip and off some of those channels that run through. If you see a channel, there's a boat channel close enough, there's a buoy close enough, that water's a little deeper, those are fish highways. So I'm typically looking to target fish moving in and out of those channels. And also, during those outgoing tides, everything's going to get sucked into that channel because it's faster moving water. So the fish are going to sit on the edges of those channels and just wait for bait fish to just kind of fall into the channel or get drawn into the channel by the tide. And a lot of times I'll do a little bit better in those areas when the tide is typically a little bit lower. Again, I think it concentrates the fish all into those channel areas. And then once you get to the flood, and especially on a moon, like there's so much water that the bait can move around and really get on the shore, that I think these fish just, they're spread out. They're more spread out. Not to say they typically won't get them, but they're more spread out. Usually, you'll notice you'll be getting whacked in the same spot. Those fish are relatively the same distance back in, or that's when those fish are hanging on that channel. And on a good night or a good day, you can see where your plug is getting hit, and kind of concentrate on those areas on the edges of those channels, because that's where those fish are going to hang until, like I said, it gets either too much water, and then not that down here you have the entire tides to work, because you can always pretty much hit deep enough water to work a plug. And again, I'm using the same things. I'm using the SP minnows, the mag darters, more bucktails in those areas, more bucktails, even little swim shads and stuff like that, running those through. My concern again is that we're not going to see those smaller fish, and all of a sudden it's going to be 32 to 35-inch fish are just going to be there. Not typically good for the biomass and the stock of the fish. Good for everybody who wants to catch bigger fish, but like I've said, yeah, great, bigger fish, but we don't have anything coming up the ranks here. So typically that's how I'm going to approach pretty much all through the next few days. We have a moon coming up. I think Saturday, Sunday. There's a moon coming up, and that's what I'm expecting to see, a big push of fish moving all throughout the South Shore of Long Island. I think that's when you're typically going to see those fish start moving into the bays, start moving into the inlets. Remember, they got to get to those bays somehow. They're not just magically appearing in the bay. They are running down the ocean front and entering these bays through the inlets. So, there's probably a pretty good chance that they'll stage up in the inlets. They'll be fishing in the inlets. They'll start filling in. You'll get your typical fish that come on in and hang there all spring, summer long. And then you have fish leave and, keep it moving. And then, then kind of May is when we start talking about some of the larger fish that come in. Not that in the past few years when the weather is warmer, I've had some pretty decently large fish in the back bay, to 25 pounds on certain nights. But that was another one where everything just kind of lined up perfectly with the wind, with the tide, and with the bait that was there. Those are the three key things that, if they line up, I mean, that's when you're looking to have a good night, any time of the year. Really, everybody talks about northeast wind in the fall, northeast wind in the fall. Yeah, no, northeast wind in the spring too, and especially as you get later on in the spring and start fishing the front side. But you can typically have some really good nights on that northeast wind, because guess what? There's bunker on the front side, and these fish are moving in. So if you can get to that, but I don't want to get too far into that, because that's like the next part two of the early spring, and this is probably going to be like a 3-part series, I would say, by the time I get done talking about it. Because like I said, if I were to do from here to what I do in June, this video would be way too long. So yeah, Ryan, that's kind of how I approach the season, or I have in the past. Like I said, tactically, I'm gonna have to probably make some changes with how often I'm gonna go out there and pound those western spots. They used to make sense to hit 10 minutes. I could be, in 20 minutes, a half hour, I could be in my waders and casting. Now it's quite a bit of a drive, and if the fishing was good, it would be worth taking the drive. It would, but it's just not. So guys, that's going to wrap it up for part one. Like I said, typically, looking for warmer water, deep back bays, whether it's on the North Shore or the South Shore. In the spring, I'm pretty much starting with back bay spots and channels, and deep into coves. A lot of those coves, back to the early season, those fish pretty much can, if there's bait, get it back there, and then it's got it trapped. That's sometimes as far as it can go, and then I get, like I said, or into those creeks. But then on the outgoing, when that water starts draining out, like I said, these fish got to come out. They can't stay back there. There's no water. So, or it all gets flushed out. And again, of course, moon tides are stronger, so they're going to pull more bait out. That's why typically those fish will be set up a lot better on those tides. I haven't really seen much bait at all. I didn't see any bunker up on the North Shore. I think I'm repeating myself. I've seen some bunker down here. I think this upcoming moon, this upcoming week, guys, is gonna set some things off. I think you really need to target, if you haven't been out there yet. This is the time coming up. I'll probably be out most nights this week, even though it hasn't been successful, because I know it's going to be like any day, and it could be, like I said, it could be before, could be after. There's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no pattern in it. Last year, no, it wasn't last year. The year before, and the year before that, I had already had bluefish back here. Only for a night. They kind of come in and like scout fish. Like, I'll get them one night. I'll be like, oh my God, there's bluefish back here. They're typically pretty big. And then, I'll go back the next night and say, all right, I'm going to go get more of those bluefish. And they're gone. Another good way to learn, besides watching my videos, you got to get out there. Fishing I can talk about fishing on these videos all I want, but fishing is more of a feel. That's why I don't say just throw the SP minnows, throw the mag darters, throw whatever you're comfortable with catching fish. I'm going to talk a lot about that this year, because I've said it for years, is comfort level. If you have confidence in the lure that it's going to catch fish, you're going to catch fish on it. If this is, I use this lure, and this is the lure that I use, and you're catching fish on it, yeah, you have confidence in that lure, and you have no hesitation and no holdbacks on throwing that lure. And typically, guys will get hung up on that one thing. Try different things. Get confidence in every plug that you can. The gliders and what's the other one? Needlefish. I have no confidence in the needlefish whatsoever, and I watch guys peg fish on them right next to me, and I'll throw the needlefish on, and I'm just lost. I can't figure it out. But what I have to do is fish that needlefish more often, And I know that once I get that feel, once I get that hit, and I get that feel on that lure, you're gonna have confidence. The darters, I couldn't throw a darter for years. When I had first started, I was like, what does this thing even do? You know, and no luck with them, no luck with them, no luck with them. And then you get one fish on, and you're like, oh, okay. And then another one, oh, all right, this thing works. And now darters and bottle plugs are pretty much my go-to for the front side. I mean, I should be probably throwing SP minnows more because then a profile also. You know, mix it up. Learn how to use plugs. Gain confidence in using these plugs. Metal lips. And I'm going to talk about a few plugs coming up on videos that are really like forgotten plugs that really do still work. All right, guys. So I'm going to wrap it up here, and I'll do a part 2, I think, a little bit later in the season to see how things go with this. Again, a lot of my fishing is at night, so you really don't see too much of what I'm doing. Like I said, I'm going to try to go back during the day if I do get night video and kind of show you what exactly that I'm doing, that I had those fish, if I could find them. All right, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you to all the new subscribers for checking us out. If you like this video, please subscribe. Guys, leave a comment down below. Let me know how you guys are doing this season, if you guys are doing any better. I know that there was some pretty good bites that happened further west and south. You know, Raritan, New Jersey area. I know that kind of went off. I have gone to some of those areas in the past. I did not this year. You know, maybe in the future. I just didn't pick up the permits to go out there this year, and just didn't feel like making a 2-hour drive. Kind of just holding back, standing my ground, and fishing my local spots, and kind of beating them up and waiting for the fish to come to me. That's kind of how I'm approaching this right now. I'm not running and gunning. Again, if you guys like the video, please you know, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us grow. Thank you to all the new subscribers. You know, we've got quite a few. And that's it, guys. I will check you guys out on the next video. Good luck, tight lines. Hopefully you guys' spring has been a little bit better than mine. All right. Have a good one.